Something very interesting is quietly taking shape inside the Pittsburgh Steelers organization right now, and if you really pay attention to the direction this team is moving, especially when it comes to leadership and long-term planning, you start to see a bigger picture forming that not everyone is talking about yet. There's a growing conversation around Mike McCarthy and what he could realistically become for the Steelers, and it all stems from a comparison that at first might sound a bit bold, but the more you break it down, the more it actually makes sense. The idea is simple. Can McCarthy follow a similar path to what Andy Reid did with the Kansas City Chiefs, or even what Sean Payton is trying to build with the Denver Broncos? Now, before jumping to conclusions, it's important to understand the context behind those situations. Andy Reid didn't walk into a ready-made dynasty. When he took over the Chiefs back in 2013, that team was coming off multiple losing seasons, including a brutal 2-14 record. They had high draft picks, opportunities to reshape the roster, and eventually, they struck gold by drafting Patrick Mahomes. But even then, it wasn't immediate. Mahomes sat, developed, and then exploded onto the scene with a strong supporting cast already in place. Sean Payton's situation in Denver was also built on years of failure before his arrival. The Broncos had stacked losing seasons, 5-6 years of inconsistency and poor results, which gave them access to high draft capital and the ability to reset the roster in a major way. Payton inherited a team that needed a full rebuild, and while he's improved things with back-to-back winning seasons, it's still far from what Andy Reid accomplished. And even now, Bo Nix, despite putting up volume stats, hasn't proven to be an elite quarterback when you look deeper into efficiency metrics. And that's where things get really interesting when you bring it back to Pittsburgh, because Mike McCarthy is stepping into a completely different environment. This is not a team that's been losing for years. This is not a roster built from top 5 draft picks stacked over multiple seasons. The Steelers under Mike Tomlin have never had a losing season. That consistency has kept them competitive, but it also means they haven't had the luxury of rebuilding through elite draft positioning. So the question becomes, does that hurt McCarthy's chances, or actually help him? Because unlike those other situations, McCarthy isn't starting from scratch. He's inheriting a team that already has structure, identity, and pieces in place. There's a young defensive core, there's an offensive line that still has room to grow, and there are playmakers already in their prime. Guys like DK Metcalf, Michael Pittman, Pat Freiermuth, Jalen Warren, and Rico Dowdle. That's not a rebuilding roster. That's a foundation. And that changes the entire strategy. Instead of forcing a quarterback pick just to try and replicate what Kansas City did with Mahomes, the smarter approach, and the one being discussed internally, is patience. Build the strongest possible team first, develop talent, stack depth, strengthen the core, and then when the right quarterback class comes along, make your move. Because one thing people forget is this: Patrick Mahomes didn't walk into a bad situation. He stepped into a team that already had weapons, protection, and stability. The same goes for Bo Nix in Denver. He wasn't asked to carry a broken roster. That defense ranked among the best in the NFL, allowing some of the fewest points and yards in the league. That's the blueprint, and the Steelers might actually be closer to that than people realize. The focus right now isn't desperation, it's development. It's about building a team strong enough to support a future quarterback, instead of asking that quarterback to fix everything on day one. That means continuing to invest in the draft, but not reaching for positions out of panic. If the right quarterback isn't there, you don't force it. You take the best player available, you keep building, and you stay disciplined, because that's how you avoid draft busts. That's how you avoid setting your franchise back years. So when people ask if Mike McCarthy can become that kind of transformational coach for the Steelers, the honest answer is, yes, it's possible, but it's going to look different. He doesn't have the same path Andy Reid had. He doesn't have the same reset Sean Payton got in Denver, but what he does have is a stable organization, a competitive roster, and a chance to build something sustainable instead of something rushed. And maybe that's even more dangerous in the long run. If the Steelers stay patient, keep developing their core, and eventually land the right quarterback at the right time, then you could be looking at a situation where everything clicks all at once. So the real question isn't just whether Mike McCarthy can replicate what those other coaches did. It's whether the Steelers are positioning themselves to do it in a smarter, more controlled way. And if they are fans ready to trust that process, even if it means waiting a little longer for that franchise quarterback? And that's exactly where the pressure starts to build, because staying patient sounds good in theory, but in reality, it tests everyone involved. It tests the front office, it tests the coaching staff, and most importantly, it tests the fan base that's been waiting for that true franchise quarterback since the end of the Ben Roethlisberger era. Because let's be honest here, this city is not used to waiting. The Steelers have built their identity on consistency, on always being in the mix, always fighting, always relevant. But that same consistency has created this unusual situation where they're good, just not good enough to truly contend. And that's the gap Mike McCarthy now has to close, not by tearing everything down, but by elevating what's already there. And one of the biggest talking points right now is how they approach this upcoming draft and the quarterback situation tied to it. Internally, the message has been very clear. Do not force it. If this isn't the right class, if the right guy isn't there, you don't reach. You don't gamble on a player just because of positional need. That's how teams fall into long-term problems. Instead, the idea is to keep stacking talent across the roster. Wide receivers, edge rushers, guards, defensive pieces. This draft class offers strength in multiple areas, and the Steelers are in a position to take advantage of that. Build the strongest possible version of this team now, and let that foundation carry forward into next season, because next year, that's where things could get very interesting. There's already growing anticipation around future quarterback classes, and while nothing is guaranteed, the belief is that waiting could put Pittsburgh in a much better position to find their guy. But here's the key difference compared to other teams. If the Steelers do it this way, that quarterback won't be walking into chaos. He'll be stepping into a system that's ready, a team with a functioning offensive line, a defense that can keep games under control, playmakers who can create separation and make life easier. That's the environment where young quarterbacks succeed. That's the environment where you don't need a rookie to be perfect. You just need him to grow. And that's exactly what Andy Reid created before Mahomes took over. So when you look at McCarthy's challenge, it's not about replicating the exact same path. It's about understanding the principles behind it: stability, development, timing, and most importantly, discipline and decision making. Because one wrong move at quarterback can set you back years. Now, at the same time, there are still internal questions that need to be answered. Player development is a big one. You look at someone like Peyton Wilson, for example, a player with clear athletic tools, speed, and size, but still trying to find consistency at the linebacker position. There's been outside talk about possibly moving him to safety, trying to maximize his skill set in a different role. But inside the building, that's not the mindset. The belief is that moving him now would actually slow down his development. He's still learning the fundamentals of his current position, run fits, shedding blocks, positioning, and asking him to switch roles entirely could create more problems than it solves. Instead, the focus is on helping him grow within the system, improving the defensive front around him, and allowing his natural athleticism to shine where it's supposed to. That same philosophy applies across the roster. Don't panic, don't overcorrect, develop what you have. And that's why this upcoming season is so important. Not because it's a Super Bowl or bust year, but because it's a year where identity gets solidified. It's where you start to see if this vision actually works. If the offensive line takes a step forward, if the defense leans into its younger core, if the playmakers continue to produce, then suddenly the conversation changes. Then you're not just a team looking for a quarterback, you're a team that a quarterback would thrive in, and that's a completely different position to be in. So as this all unfolds, the spotlight is going to stay on Mike McCarthy. Every decision, every draft pick, every adjustment, it's all going to be evaluated through this lens of, can he be the guy to take them over the top? But maybe the better way to look at it is this: he doesn't need to rush to prove anything. If he builds this the right way, if he stays true to the process, the results will come, and when they do, they could come fast. Because that decision right there, that crossroads between patience and urgency, is going to define not just this next draft, but the entire direction of the franchise moving forward. If the Steelers stay disciplined, what you're really watching is a team trying to avoid the trap that so many organizations fall into, reaching for a quarterback just to say they have one. We've seen it happen across the league. Teams convince themselves a prospect is the guy, invest everything into him, and then spend the next 3 to 4 years trying to fix that mistake. That's exactly what Pittsburgh is trying to stay away from, and that's why the approach you're seeing right now might feel slow, but it's intentional. Because if this works, if they hit on the right pieces now, if that offensive line truly takes shape, if the defense continues to anchor games, if those playmakers keep producing, then the moment they do find their quarterback, everything accelerates. You're not building anymore at that point, you're competing, and that's when things change fast in the NFL. But there's another layer to this that not enough people are talking about, and it's how Mike McCarthy handles development behind the scenes. Not just with young players, but with the entire structure of the offense. Because one of the biggest criticisms in recent years hasn't just been about talent, it's been about maximizing that talent. Can this system elevate players? Can it create consistency? Can it adapt? Those are the questions that will quietly determine whether this plan succeeds or falls apart. Because having weapons like DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman is one thing. Using them the right way is another. Having a promising offensive line is one thing. Turning it into a reliable unit is another. And building a strong defense is great, but sustaining that level year after year is what separates good teams from great ones. So while everyone's focused on the quarterback conversation, and rightfully so, the real evaluation is happening across the entire roster. Are players improving? Is the team becoming more complete? Are the gaps from previous seasons actually being addressed? If the answer to those questions starts to become yes, then you'll know the Steelers are on the right path, even before they find their franchise quarterback. And that's what makes this stretch so fascinating, because it's not about one move. It's about alignment. Front office, coaching staff, roster development, all moving in the same direction without forcing the timeline. That's how you build something sustainable. That's how you create a window that stays open instead of one that closes after a single run. And if Mike McCarthy gets that right, then the comparison to Andy Reid won't feel so far-fetched anymore. It won't be about copying what Kansas City did. It'll be about understanding why it worked and applying those lessons in a way that fits Pittsburgh. But again, it all comes back to that one decision. Do you trust the process, or do you try to speed it up? Because the Steelers are clearly choosing their path right now, and it's one that requires discipline, patience, and belief in long-term success over short-term excitement. And the more you zoom out, the clearer it becomes. This isn't just about fixing a position, it's about setting up the next era of Steelers football the right way. Because if they hit on this plan, you're not looking at a team that's just good again. You're looking at one that's built to stay at the top for years. A roster that doesn't depend on one player to carry everything, but instead supports whoever steps in at quarterback and allows him to grow into the role naturally. That's how dynasties actually start. Not with desperation moves, not